So the meeting is recording, so please feel free to stay off camera if that's your preference. And if you do want to give any examples or ask any questions, we just ask that you not share any PHI. So thank you all for joining us again. And Tina, if you would like to dive in, I think we'll start talking first about the two options for how to put ARIS paid claims and services on the budget calculators.
Yes. So I want to talk through the first, I guess, example or option is what has already been taking place. People have been reviewing what's in the budget calculators, hopefully reviewing what hours have been input and updating the self-managed rates as needed so that the totals are populated within the budget calculator. If this is something that your agency has already completed or you're near completion, this would probably be the way that you want to go ahead and finish out, because if you're already done or you're almost done, you've already done most of the work. And then if we proceed with this option that the ARIS paid services would become just that total dollar amount, that would be their budget they were working from, and we were less concerned with inputting the individual wage and hours, then we would go ahead and take those dollars from what's been submitted in the workbooks, and that would then become the individual's dollar budget. The other option, if you haven't gotten through very many of your budget calculators with making these updates, or you just feel this would be the most straightforward approach, is to use the tool that we've already put out there into the roster files. Just so much I have all the correct columns hidden here. And so what we're proposing is for you to be able to report to us what that individual's total annual budget is, because we know that there are different levels of progress. The data that we received was in the beginning 26 waiver spreadsheets. Some providers may have already had a 2% increase in there. Some have done a respread since. So we would just be looking to capture what is that final budget amount that the individual should have for respite daily or respite hourly. We're using this to collect the data because we've already got the files out there, and it should be straightforward to follow. Since we would be going this route, we would just be ignoring the rest of these columns. We're not doing any more calculations here. We're just looking to try to capture the correct final budget amount that should be for that individual for that particular service. And then we would also want you to report to us, if known, any mileage dollars that were included. So for example, in community contract or employment contract, they could have mileage dollars included in those dollars. So we would want to report those. So we would only ask you to be filling out these two columns. Then we could take those dollars and apply the individual's budget to their budget calculators. Is there any questions about those two options of how we would be collecting that data? Yeah. Thought I saw a hand up, but then I can't see.
Oh,
No?
it was someone needing to be admitted.
Oh, I saw the little flicker.
Yeah, so is that clear to everyone? You have two options. We would need to just know what your agency would like to do. If you have the budget calculators and you're putting in the units and the wages to get to the grand total of what someone's been allocated and that work is done, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do the second option. But if you are in a situation where either you don't know what the wages are, or maybe it's too complicated and you'd rather just update columns K and L, that is okay. That is something that then Tina will be able to populate the calculators appropriately based on kind of the annual allocations. That's right, Tina, I'm not misspeaking, right?
Correct. We're looking for the annual total cost, wherever that has landed after the respreads were done. Oh, good question. Someone posted, how should they communicate that to us? Actually, if you could email me, I don't need to hear from each individual, but at least from each provider agency could email me and say, please take our ERIS data from our budget calculators, or we will complete the roster file and let you know when that's completed. So if you could just let me know. Unless you had other thoughts about that, Jessica.
I think letting you know is great because you're the one who has to do the work on it. If you want to CC me, please do. If it's 3 days from now you make the decision and you can't find Tina's email and you email me, I will then clue her into what your decision is. But if you can email both of us, or if you can only remember one of our emails, that's fine. We'll loop the other person in.
Yes.
I'm not seeing any more hands or questions in the chat. So why don't we shift over to just walking through some examples of putting things into the calculator, and then we can just jump to questions.
Jessica,
Yes.
can I add one thing quickly?
Of course.
This is Stephen. I just want to make clear that different agencies can reach different decisions about which of the two approaches you prefer, but it needs to be the same at the agency level. So it's not that we're going to do approach number one for these 20 people and approach number two for these 20 people. It is one approach or the other. Now, again, we want to leave the flexibility to the agency, so we don't need a decision across all agencies. But within an agency, we're only going to be able to accept one approach or the other so that we can make sure that we accurately compile the information.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that, Stephen. If half of the people you're working with, the budget calculator for the units and wages is going fine, but you can't adjust it the same way for the other half, you're right, you can't do half and half. You would need to choose one approach for your calculator.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. And actually, I just had a thought that I'd kind of along those lines, and I'm going to go through this as an example. But while we already have this roster file up on here, if you're going this route and you have an individual that on their budget calculator, let's say their community support was not in the contract column and it was populated in the community support by agency staff, but they actually are receiving contract support. It's self-managed going through ERIS, and that's going to need to be an update made on the budget calculator. I'll show that in a moment, but what you'll need to do if you're reporting on here, if you're an agency that chooses to report the total annual cost on this roster spreadsheet, they won't be pre-populated on this list because their budget was showing up as if it was agency provided on the waiver spreadsheet. And so you only need to add them to the bottom. And I've been working over the last 2 days, I've been going into each individual roster and adding some blank rows at the bottom. So if you don't see them yet, I'll be getting to yours, but I have added it to most of the files that are out there on the SharePoint. So I get to the bottom here. So it'll look like this, and obviously you'll have your columns to the left of H here that are person identifying. But you would just go ahead and add, make sure you specify what type it is. So if it's community contract, you would want to add that. And we'll do that. They're getting 10 hours per week, which is 520 hours per year. Which actually, now that I think about it, you don't actually have to add to that part because we're just looking for the total annual cost. But anyway, you would add that those dollar amounts there, whatever would be related. I'm just kind of, so that's the 20,000 there. And then if they did have mileage, you would have to enter it here. So I just want to make sure I mentioned that if somehow the individual wasn't pre-populated on here, you just need to add it to the bottom. So while
And
I've got
also-
that, yes.
I was just going to build on that, Tina, that example of if they had $20,000 in community support, and just that reminder of if 2,000 of that is transportation, make sure that you pull the 2,000 out and it's 18,000 community, 2,000 transportation mileage. If it's the total amount with no transportation or mileage in it, then that's fine, leave it as is, but take any mileage out and reduce it from the overall community or whatever the ARIS paid claim, ARIS paid service is. Just make sure to separate those out.
Now I'm thinking out loud here because I want to make sure we're being clear. I was originally thinking that this column K would be the true total, what you've got calculated on your respread, and that we would then subtract the mileage dollars reported here. But I don't want to provide any, I don't want it to be more confusing. Actually, I'd be curious to hear, because I've talked to several providers that said they don't know any mileage amounts. Are there any providers on the call who have mileage amounts to report? Would it be better to be clear that you're subtracting the mileage amounts from the total? Or would you want to put your totals in and then report which part of that is the mileage? I don't want to get it confusing. Now I feel like I've said it in a confusing manner.
Lindsay?
I think if in column K, if we could put the annual total that aligns with what's on our current waiver spreadsheet, and then column L, we would put just the portion of mileage that comes out of column K.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
I
just want to make sure it was clear.
I don't know if others, I mean, I don't know if others agree, but that's how I was interpreting this being used initially. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah. So I'm glad we talked through that. So we'll just keep column K, the original total annual cost. And then when we're doing the math part, we'll go ahead and subtract the mileage dollars reported in column L and report them separately on the budget calculator.
So in this example, I just want to make sure I understand, and hopefully my questions will mean everyone else will also understand. So in this last example, the total allocation is $20,000. Keep that in K. If they have $2,000 mileage, you're still going to put that in L, but you're going to leave K as $20,000 because you'll then do the piece to separate out the mileage from the allocation.
Yes. Yes. So we would subtract the 2,000, that would leave 18,000. And then, we would do the math of the prorating for 9 months. And that would go into the budget calculator.
Great.
Trying to spot that little, looks like a good question.
So Lindsay's asking, can you please walk through the process of updating calculators? If an agency chooses option 2, will you take down the calculators and reload them? Would any info already entered be saved? Will you inform agencies when you're done? And how quickly do you think this would be completed?
Good question. So just to be clear, option 2, we're talking about utilizing this roster file to report the self-managed contract services that go through ARIS. And our current thinking, because we're already at, let's see, October 23rd, current thinking is that we would then incorporate this data into the budget calculators at the time of the month-end processing. So we would keep anything entered in the budget calculators as far as agency delivered services, things that are not related to the totals being reported here. Then during that month-end processing, we would update anything reported in the budget calculators. If there was old data in there related to self-managed services, that would get replaced by what's in this roster file at that time when we're doing the month-end processing, which I know we've not nailed down the dates for that yet. I don't think we're looking at it as doing an interim step.
So calculators would be updated by the agencies. We'd hear that their calculator is ready. If they chose option 2, you would then know that you could go in and update based on what's in columns K and L. And you would update the budget calculator based on that piece. All the other original information would stay. So the person's identifying information, their other non-contracted supports, all of that would stay as is. There would no one would have to redo any work.
Correct.
And then would you inform agencies when you are done? Would that be an email you'd be able to send out, Tina, as you worked through each agency?
Yes. I was initially anticipating that it would be an all at once, but considering this is our first go around, it may make more sense to, if a particular agency is done, process through their files and get those done in case other agencies may be taking longer to get through all of theirs. So.
And I know this is a process that hasn't happened yet, but if you had to think about a time frame, do you have an estimate of how long this kind of update would take?
I'm not sure yet. Again, it's better if I can process, if half the agencies are ready at once, I would process all of theirs, probably over the course of an evening, and again, get them loaded up the next day. So it just sort of depends. Again, I don't want to hold people up if their files are ready and other providers need more time. But hopefully I'm hoping it'd be like about a 1-day process.
Okay.
I think.
Great. Lindsay, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I've had a lot of questions. I'm just wondering, will agencies, after we submit the calculator, either using option 1 or option 2, will we still have access to those calculators in the SharePoint file? I mean, even if we can't make updates after that, could we still have access even if they were locked in some way so that we can reference them for our own analysis? I'm thinking of things like wanting to know if somebody is above or below their total budget. That would be helpful because we might want to keep a record of that for future, and we haven't been able to develop a system yet to sort of, our own spreadsheet to capture that information.
Yes. So the intention is that these budget calculator files will continue to reside on the SharePoint, where you would still have access to view them, and the case management organizations also will be able to view them, and they would be the ones responsible for making changes going forward, but you would still be able to view them.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
And you will also have a large file with all of the people that you serve that will have all of their information, which will help us calculate your PMPM as well. So you'll continue to have access to that as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything else in the chat. I don't see hands. Maybe we could walk through a few examples and then continue to open it up to questions.
So I'm just going to kind of do a brief walk through the beginning just for a refresher. Obviously, I've removed any PHI from this particular file, but this is an example of this is an actual real file. And when agencies come in to review these, we would want you to review all of the data that's input here. Hopefully, most of it would be correct. If there's anything that needs revision, we're asking you to revise it. This particular person is living with unpaid caregivers. If they were they're shared living, we would ask you to input the current payment to the shared living home provider. Or if they were group living, you do need to select the home size. So I just want to review that stuff at the top. Excuse me. So coming down through here, because this person is living with family, there's nothing up here in this portion of the residential section. When we come down here, they're receiving their in-home family support. So this could be reviewed to see if that looks accurate. And then we're coming down here to their community supports. And the reason I wanted to bring up this example is this is an individual that their budget was placed here because on their waiver spreadsheet, their 520 hours for the year was budgeted in the agency column. But in fact, upon review, the provider determined that this person actually is receiving, these are self-family managed services. So this is something that needs correction. So we're going to just move the hours down here. We do need to remove them from up here. If you leave them in here, we'll think they're still getting agency community support. And so you could either zero this out or just delete the units that were populated here. And you can come down and add them here. So now here's where this kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier in the call for the self-managed services. If you know the correct wage amount, you go ahead, you can go ahead and enter that. Otherwise, if you were choosing the option 2, where you're going to use that roster file, you actually would need to enter the units here. You would just go to the roster file and make sure you're entering the individual's total annual budget for their community supports that are self and family managed. But it would be important to make sure you remove their hours from the agency community support, since that's not what they're receiving.
Will you just say that again? If you're using option 2, do you still want someone to put the units on the calculator piece?
It is not needed because we're going to be populating that with their total ARIS budget. So they wouldn't need to input that here. The step they would need to do is to delete the hours out of the agency and make sure it ends up populated on that roster file.
But if the units were in there, it's not going to break anything?
Correct. It will not break anything. So for example, if an agency has already gone through and done some of their budget calculators that they have their ARIS data and they're correct, but not all of it, and they make that decision of, it's going to be easier for us to finish this up using the roster file. We'll just input everybody's total annual budget in the roster file. You wouldn't need to worry about going back and deleting where you've already input data. You can just leave it there. We're going to overwrite anything with what's populated in the roster file.
Right.
If you choose that option.
Thank you. And then
Mhm.
I'll just say again, which you have been great about reminding people, never cut and paste. So this is a great example of if you needed to move from agency to contracted, don't cut and paste. Do either what Tina did. If you need to copy and paste, that's an okay function, but really never cut and paste.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
And Maggie?
Thanks, and sorry for this, but I know there's a lot of us that joined late, myself included. So could you, like, is it possible to just quickly just reiterate what you're talking about when you say option 1 and option 2? Because I feel like you're going to reference that a lot, and I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Yes, yes.
Thank
So
you.
thanks for bringing that up. Yes, if you joined the call late, we just did begin by discussing the email that was sent out saying that we are going to give agencies the option to report an individual's total budget for their self-managed services, just as a total annual dollar amount. So there are going to be two options. If agencies have already completed their budget calculators or they're near completing their budget calculators with accurately updating individual self-managed services within the calculators, we will go ahead and use the dollar amounts reported in the budget calculators. And you would let me know, or if you can't remember my email address, you can let Jessica know that your agency is choosing the budget calculator option for reporting your self-managed services. Option 2 is going to be using the roster files that have already been placed into the SharePoints. And we're going to be focusing only on column K and L. You can ignore the rest of the columns here, but we're using this as a tool to go ahead and report that annual budget for the individual. So this would be wherever your agency has landed, because again, we only had the beginning fiscal year 26 waiver spreadsheets. So we understand, at some point that 2% was applied, a respread was done. So this is your opportunity to just go ahead and report everybody for your agency that total annual budget for the individual. And then you're not having to worry about what is the wage being used and what number of hours does that translate to. We're just going to go with what that total dollar amount is. We do want you to also still report in column L any mileage dollars that are included in the total cost of K. So again, we want K to be that total annual amount that is on your waiver spreadsheet. And if there are any mileage dollars that have been included in that, please report that in column L. So that would be option 2. And we're asking providers to choose one or the other so that we know where to draw all of your data from.
And I'll just
Okay.
reiterate the same thing that I brought up earlier, that the column K, it's the total approved kind of allotment. And if there are mileage dollars, leave the full amount. So if it's $20,000 and they have $2,000 of mileage, keep column K, $20,000, but still just tell us what the amount of mileage is. And Tina and her amazing formulas will do the math on that one. So keep column K the total amount, and then just let us know of those dollars how much mileage is included if you know it.
Okay, and then once the agency decides if they're going to use option A or B, that's what they're sticking with, or will agencies then eventually all move towards like the option A of using the budget calculator?
I think I can answer. So this would be a one-time thing where we were trying to get
Okay.
the waiver spreadsheets budgets into the budget calculators. And if you're choosing this option B to use the roster file and reporting the total dollar amounts, that's going to take place at that month-end processing. And the dollar amounts will then be populated into the budget calculators. And from there on forward, there really shouldn't be a need to use this file again, or
Okay.
it would just be, any ongoing changes that would go through the case management organization.
Okay, thank you for going back over this. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I'll just, since we're just kind of doing the recap, there are blank rows at the bottom for adding any individuals that may have not correctly been populated on the waiver spreadsheet initially. So if you're missing an individual that is receiving self-managed services, you can add them at the bottom of the spreadsheet. And so you would just go ahead and input their total annual cost and their mileage dollars. And that just pertains back to that example I was walking through on the budget calculator.
Teresa?
Thanks, Tina. That was a great recap, I will say. I think it's worth noting that there are two distinct audiences here viewing this information. And I feel like it feels like up until this point, the information that you've presented is really provider heavy, if you will. Like this really pertains to the direct service organization. So I just want all of the CMO employees that are on the call to understand like what you're reviewing right now up until this point has been for the direct service organizations. I think that was a little, I think I saw a little fear in everybody's eyes.
Thank you for mentioning that and clarifying. Yes, this is very specific for service providers.
Okay, I don't see anything else in the chat. No hands, just more people coming in. So I think we can probably jump back to the example.
Okay. And remember which one I was on. Oh, this one. Well, I'll just go ahead and complete this one. For example, we'll just say this individual's, I'll just pick a nice round $20. Oop. So if you were an agency that had chosen the option to update your budget calculators with the self-managed services, then you would need to input the wage there because we were just walking through the steps of moving this from the agency line to the self-managed services line here. Then as we scroll down, I don't think this individual had too much else going on. Again, this would be if you're going the route of the self-managed services in the budget calculator, you would need to review the these are days, the days being reported here and the wage that was populated here. So that would need review and updating. I don't see anything else populated down here. I did want to walk through, and we've kind of discussed some of the rounding of the units. And I didn't open that file. Wait, I might have. Oh, this one. I thought in particular, this one stood out because days don't have quarter hours or anything like that. So this individual initially had 76 days of respite daily. And because you can't encounter a 0.33 unit for a day, the way the budget calculator populates its whole units, which brings us to 54 units for the 9 months. What if we, I'll pull up my little calculator. So if we show that the 6 days per month, and if we annualize that by 12 months, you can see we come up to 72. And it's because it's not populating it with the 6.33 in each month. So what you can do is, I probably would go ahead and populate an extra unit every 3 months. And that's going to get you to, so that's going to be 57 total for the 9 months. And then, yeah, presuming the first quarter was evenly distributed. But since that was an example that I did have a provider reach out about, because the days aren't populating as the 6.33, how could you adjust to make sure they're getting the correct number of days in here? Or again, alternately, if you were using the option number 2 and just reporting the total dollar amounts, then you would just put that in the roster file and you wouldn't have to worry about the units for the self-managed services. So those kind of highlight the topics of questions that have come up, some good questions from providers over the last week or so of items I thought were worthwhile to kind of walk through. Is there anybody that has any more questions about maybe how to complete something on the budget calculator or topics we've already discussed? Or I know we have some CMOs on the call that may also have questions. So
We have a question in the chat, but it's kind of moving toward questions about the future roster file. And so I think if we could just maybe, or let me read the question. So are you able to walk us through what will be included on the roster file? Will it break down the service model for each individual along with annual funding as it appears on calculator and approved budget ranges? But I want to make sure if we have any specific questions before we kind of pivot a little bit about the calculator or rounding, we should probably tackle those first and then we can shift over to the roster. I don't see hands. I don't see anything else in the chat. So I think it looks like maybe we can talk through what is going to be included on the roster file.
that is a really good question. And I think when we came up with this idea yesterday, we didn't really talk through because you're right. We just have like community support contracts. This is all taken from the original waiver spreadsheets. And so that doesn't help us differentiate if they're receiving 1 to 2 or 2 to 1, or exactly how that particular self-managed service should be broken out.
Lindsay?
So I think we need to come up with a solution for that.
Well, actually, I was asking about the main roster file for billing PM. And so I know that you're still kind of working on the budget calculator, and that question my question can wait till later, but I didn't know if you if that was something that was already created and we just hadn't heard yet in other meetings, or I hadn't heard what would be included on that.
It's not something that's been finalized. It's something that I'm in the middle of working on. I'm definitely, I'm open to hearing from providers about what would be helpful to have included. I don't want to create something that's not going to work for provider agencies and your purposes. So, but it's not something that's completed yet.
I was just curious if Jessica, Tina, and Stephen, you are open to agencies maybe submitting some feedback to you about that. It would be nice to be able to capture some things in one place so that we don't always have to reference every individual calculator if we're trying to find out, how much service somebody is. So are you open to getting some email feedback from agencies about that?
Yes, I am. And I will do my best to incorporate data that will be beneficial. So we just have to see how it all goes in the design of everything. But I'm definitely open to hearing requests for what would be meaningful and useful for your agencies. Yes.
Thanks.
And we can talk after the fact to see if what's the format that makes the most sense to get feedback on? Is it email? Is it having kind of a meeting where people can talk through things? Because Tina, there may be things suggested that you might want to expand upon to say, here is what that would look, why this might or might not work in a formula. And so there could be some opportunities. So we'll talk about the best way to give feedback to make sure that we can really just get all of the details and talk through things. It might be easier.
Yes.
Other calculator questions, roster, anything that's proving to be tricky or not quite working the way you thought it would? I know a lot of it was around the contracted claims. But if there are other things too that were not working the way you thought, or maybe you're running into an issue, we'd be happy to talk through an example, a de-identified example. Not seeing hands. Oh, did I hear someone?
I was just saying, I'll stop sharing and then see if there's any other questions.
I know we've had multiple meetings like this, so I'm hoping not seeing any hands or anything in the chat means that things are going okay. But I do want to just encourage everyone, if there's something that's not working or you have a question, I promise you there's somebody else out there too who does. So this is not usually a shy group, but if you're worried that it's already been asked, please ask it again. This is a new process, so please jump in if there's anything that needs to be cleared up. We'd be happy to go over it again. Otherwise, everyone is
I
very,
have a
very
question. Actually, I'll
great.
throw it out there.
Thanks,
I
Maggie.
think we've definitely gone over this, and it may have been gone over before I joined. Was it said how we were going to capture if there were different pay rates for like support workers? Like if someone's getting like $20 an hour versus the family paying someone else $25 an hour, how we were gonna put that into the calculator?
So yeah, Tina, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes. So for sure, I'm not sure. I believe we are moving forward with this option of we've decided to just track these budgets in total and not try to get to the individual wages and hours specifically, but track the total annual amounts.
So is that the option B we were then talking about? They would utilize that? Or no?
Yes.
Okay.
I think, Jessica, is it like this is where we're going forward? We're not going to be tracking the individual hours and wages anymore?
Well, if
Or-
somebody's choosing option one, we would still want a process for having to put something in the calculator, right? So I think we have, for people who are choosing,
Because the totals need to be correct. It has to get them to that total budget.
right.
Right. So did I answer your question, Maggie? I'm sorry. I feel like I made that more confusing.
No, I was kind of like thinking, and then I've been like taking some notes. So I was just looking at those. I might just like have to do some more walking through and asking more questions, but I think it makes sense when I'll do it and look at it. Or do you have an example that you could show where that is a scenario and how that would be done? Or maybe for like
So-
the next meeting, if that's an example we could share, or I could reach out separately for that if I'm the only one that's still struggling with that.
Right. So if that is a struggle, I mean, again, you're gonna have to make a decision for your entire agency has to choose one reporting method. But if it's challenging to get those correct wages and hours into the budget calculators to arrive at the correct total budget, you can choose to report the total budgets for self-managed services in this. I'll share my screen again. In this file here. And then you would not need to be concerned about the different wages that an individual was paying to a couple of different workers. So if they had a couple of different people that were providing their community contract services, it wouldn't matter. You would just report their total annual cost as it is currently.
So if that's option B,
Okay.
right? And if people are doing
Mhm.
option A, I think we have a few minutes. Would you walk through an example, Tina, of what that would look like for option A? If someone wants to, keep using those categories.
So on the wage calculator, this is where you would input the different employees, how many hours per month were worked by that employee, and then what their wage is. So I'll just go ahead and make up some numbers, but let's say this individual works for the family at 20 hours per month, and their wage was $18.50 per hour. And then there's another individual that also helps the family some, and they work 10 hours per month, and their wage is 21. So then that weighted wage would be 19.33.
Okay, yeah, I'm remembering this now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for bringing it up, though, Maggie. I promise you're not the only person who wanted to revisit that.
And I think just a lot of it's coming out our way. And as soon as you pulled this up, I was like, oh yeah. So just the quick refresher was helpful. Thanks.
Of course.
Okay, we have just a couple more minutes. Other questions? I know everyone is very busy, so you might want a few minutes before your next meeting, and that's absolutely fine. But I will say last call if you want to put something in the chat or raise your hand. Otherwise, we won't make you stay until 2 o'clock if there are no more questions.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for asking questions, making time. We do have more trainings coming up, and we'll probably take a look at calendars and see what else we can add, and we'll just keep responding to what the need is. So yeah, we will definitely just be in touch in terms of any changes that come out. So thank you for your time. And then I guess Stephen and Tina, could I steal you for the last 5 minutes?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.